Okay. Good. Afternoon, good afternoon. This public hearing conducted by the Committee on Appropriations and Adjudications will come to order. Notice of the public hearing was disseminated to all local media outlets via electronic format on Thursday, June 29th, with the second notice provided on July the 14th, 2017. Notice of the hearing was also made known on the Guam Legislature's website. There is only one item on today's agenda. That's Bill 20-34. The committee had one hearing this morning at 9 a.m. This is a 2 o'clock hearing, and after this we will recess until 6 o'clock this evening to again receive additional testimony, if any. Signed up to testify this afternoon are Bobby Shrinky, Mary Rhodes, and Sam Mabini. Anybody else? Come on up, Sam. You were first, Mr. Shrinky.
Good and good afternoon, Mr. Speaker, members of the 34th Guam Legislature. Say, Mr. Speaker, we've been, I think I practically work in this building. This is, I think, the third meeting we've had in the last couple of days or so. Anyways, honorable senators of the 34th Guam Legislature, my name is Bobby Shringy. I'm the chairman of the board for the Guam Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present the Guam Chamber of Commerce's position on Bill 2034, an act to repeal and reenact subsection 3105 of Article 1, Chapter 3 of Title 22, Guam Code Annotated, relative to responsibly raising the minimum wage. The position of the Guam Chamber of Commerce remains the same today as our original submission on February 15, 2017, which is that a government-mandated increase of the minimum wage would adversely impact the operational expenses of many small businesses, create wage compression, and result in the potential increase of goods and services on island. And therefore, we don't support the proposal. However, since the legislature, and in many discussions, there's a resolve in raising the minimum wage, we recommend the following comprehensive proposal. First of all, to minimize the impact of entry-level wage increments, the maximum wage increase that we would recommend would be $9.20 an hour to be implemented in a two-tier process, with the first being 50 cents an hour on January 1, 2018, which would be from $8.25 to $8.75 an hour, and the second being 45 cents an hour beginning on January 1, 2019, which would take the wage up to $9.20 per hour. Number two, to establish a tip credit as established in 38 states, with the minimum cash wage to be set at $7.25 an hour to represent the current federal minimum wage. Number three, to establish an hourly minimum wage for minors, those up to the age of 17, to coincide with the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Number four, amend the qualifying amount of the Dave Santos Act from stating less than $50,000 to less than $500,000, as legislation has been authored and introduced by Senator Frank Uggan to increase the gross income threshold of business privilege taxes, which was introduced, by the way, on February 20, 2017. A public hearing on Bill 25-34 has yet to be scheduled, and we're looking forward to that. And finally, to invest in workforce development. We would like to take the time to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to work with you and your staff on this issue for the last couple of months. And while we understand that we may not agree completely on the position or point or figures, we hope to continue to work with your office and members of the 34th Guam Legislature on creating a truly balanced proposal that benefits both the employees as well as the employers. In regards to our proposed recommendation on the minimum wage, the 50-cent and 45-cent tiers represent a 6% and 5% increase respectively. This is well above the average 3 to 5% increase that most private entities use as a basis for annual increments. They are reasonable and palatable figures, and certainly should not take away other increases that a business would like to provide their employees. The recommendation for the initial implementation of the January 1, 2018 date would not only provide many businesses ample time to plan and prepare for the increase, but would also align with the calendar year that many private entities utilize in terms of their budgets. Adopting the tip credit process will allow businesses whose servers attain a tip or gratuity to use the tips to fund a portion of the minimum wage. Neither the Guam Chamber of Commerce nor other business entities wish to take away from wages from servers or those who earn tips. Rather, the process seeks a balanced and simplified mechanism that would set a palatable minimum cash wage even if the minimum wage is increased in the future. The 725 proposal would be aligned with the current federal minimum wage and would coincide with the pre-2015 minimum wage increase, where there was an increment without a tip credit established. We believe that this approach would minimize the impact, we believe that this approach would minimize the impact the minimum wage increments would have on the cost of meals. And further, we support your recommendation that any tip credit policy adopted must be on the same legislation as a proposal for a minimum wage increase. Note that businesses have the option of electing the tip credit, and nothing prevents entities in paying their employees an amount above the established tip credit wage. We also look forward to the public hearing on Bill 2534, authored by Senator Frank Guggen, as that would assist many small businesses who would not only benefit from a tip credit policy, but would adversely be impacted by minimum wage increases. The savings element a business would experience would result in additional investments into the growth of their business and the possibility of job creation. In closing, we look forward to continued dialogue with you in your office on this issue in the coming weeks and possibly months, and understand that both parties are interested in assuring that the final product is a balanced effort to benefit the community in general. Thank you very much for the opportunity to submit our comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schranke. Ms. Rhodes.
Hafaday, Timbuenas. To our Honorable Speaker and all of our senators, including the Vice Speaker, Ms. Talahi. On behalf of the Guam Hotel Restaurant Association and its membership and its board of directors, we write to express our opposition to Bill 20-34, but not just as an opposition, but some recommendations with changes, which seeks to repeal and reenact Section 3105 of Article 1, Chapter 3 of Title 22 of the Guam Code Annotated relative to responsibly raising the minimum wage of $8.25 per hour to not less than $9.20 per hour and $10.10 per hour, both effective later this year and in 2018. As the leading NGO for tourism, GHRA is focused on meeting its mission to advocate just legislation and government regulations. Comprised of more than 300 member companies, GHRA has been the leader for the tourism industry, which accounts for 1.3 million visitors, generates more than $1 billion in annual revenues, and employs 20,000 people, which is more than 30% of the population, and contributes more than $50 million annually in GRTs, and collects $35 million annually for the hotel occupancy tax. Just for those who may not be aware or new to the legislature, during the 2014 and 16 testimonies, GHRA adamantly spoke out against the opposition of the proposed increases from $9.15 or $9.20, which was presented at that time, as well as $10.10, respectively. The introduction of a wage increase at the time was arbitrary and wrong without conducting an independent economic study. With that increase of $1 from $7.25 to $8.25, the bill was passed into law with the stipulation that an IES be conducted as mandated by Public Law 32-178, which the results were released for public consumption, and it was stated that we should not consider another wage increase without it. During our testimony in 2016, when 920 and 1010 were reintroduced again, we implored the senators and the legislature to vote against Bill 312-33 and follow the mandated public law. So GHRA respectfully asked the government to conduct the study, and so it did. So by the end of 2016, the IES was completed and the results were released. So thank you very much for that, for allowing that to happen. With the release of the recent study, it is understood that there are differing opinions on the accuracy and the reliability of the results. Together with Chamber of Commerce, GHRA released a joint member survey regarding the IES and impact of potential minimum wage increase to businesses. I provided a copy of our results of that survey and the presentation that was made to our membership just last month, June 2017. You will find that 94% of our respondents did not participate in the IES, which we feel our results better reflect that of the business community. As most of you already know, GHRA and its sister organizations have been meeting with the Speaker in the last 9 months to discuss Bill 20-34. GHRA has also been working closely with its members and its stakeholders with dozens of stakeholder meetings to discuss the results of our joint survey as well as the IES and the impact of a potential wage increase. In addition to all of our meetings, GHRA and Guam Chamber of Commerce, we work together again in different meetings with the Speaker so that we can come to a collaborative solution. GHRA remains steadfast in its belief that the legislature of Guam should be creating laws to help grow the economy and not suppress or inhibit growth by increasing the cost of doing business through increased wages, taxes, fees, and additional government regulations. The minimum wage is intended for entry-level positions, and wage increases should be based on performance, experience, skills, and other factors that are determined by the employer. While we don't agree with a government-mandated increase in the minimum wage, it is clear that the resolve of the legislature is to continue to pursue a minimum wage increase after several years of introducing 3 bills in the last 4 years. And with the results of the IES, which we have been waiting for, it is reasonable to expect that the legislature would continue down the path of repealing and reenacting the wage increase. The results of our meetings and the joint member survey actually were divisive on the issue of 920, but were clearly against the 1010 of the minimum wage increase. In the spirit of collaboration, it is the position of GHRA and its stakeholders to recommend a comprehensive approach and make changes to Bill 20-34. GHRA hopes the following recommendations will be used in our continued dialogue as we work together on a plan of action and strategy that is beneficial to all concerned. So let it be known that this is the first time we've actually agreed on the record to actually do something with regards to the Speaker rather than just opposing the bill straightforward. So the first recommendation is that every employer shall pay each adult person employed at a wage rate not less than $8.75 per hour by January 1, 2018, similar to Chamber of Commerce's 2-tier strategy. And then the second increment be changed to $9.20 per hour by January 2, 2019. The second one is every employer shall pay each minor under 18 years of age from ages 14 through 17 employed at a wage rate not less than $7.25, which is the federal minimum wage today, by January 1, 2018. The third piece is that for any employee who customarily and regularly receives tips or gratuities from patrons or others, the employer may pay a wage rate, which is a tip credit, not less than $7.25 per hour if the employer can establish by its record of tips or by the employee's declaration to FICA for FICA purposes that for each period, wages for when adding tips received to wages paid, the employee received not less than the minimum wage for all hours worked. So if the tips actually received the employees combined with the wages paid by the employer do not at least equal the minimum wage proposed, the employer must make up the difference on a per hour basis, on a per period basis. Any portion paid to that employee which is shared with the employee who customarily and regularly receives tips under a tip pooling or similar arrangement shall be deemed for the purposes of this section to be tips actually received by the employee. Where tips are charged on a credit card and the employer must pay the credit card company a percentage of the bill for its use, the employer may reduce the amount of the credit card tips paid over to the employee by a percentage no greater than the charges by the credit card company. Every employer using tip credit must so inform the affected employee in time of hire or prior to implementation. Any tip pooling or sharing arrangement must be made in writing and provided to each effective employee at the time of hire or prior to implementation. The recommended number of hours, according to the federal wages, is actually 20 hours per month to qualify for a tip credit. Then the fourth piece is to invest in workforce development and coordinate government resources towards providing training opportunities to increase vocational studies and provide the necessary skill sets so that every entry-level employee can command wages well above the minimum wage. By investing in people, employers and the government can help create jobs, grow the economy, and develop skilled workers. By looking at a more holistic approach, employers and employees can better focus on performance, increase productivity, pay for performance, remain competitive, lower turnover costs, recruiting, training, and helping with the retention of employees. It is our goal, GHRA, that we come to a middle ground and a compromise on the approach to this important piece of legislation. Reestablishing and implementing a tip credit system based on the federal program is valuable for the private sector and service industries to manage many variables affecting the cost of doing business. The tip credit system is very common in the mainland U.S. and has allowed enough flexibility for the employees to make more than the minimum wage. With this said, it is important to note that even with a comprehensive solution proposed today, raising the minimum wage will definitely have an effect on the economy, especially when the legislature is considering increases to gross receipts taxes, Family Medical Leave Act, health insurance premiums through more fees and taxes, and recently with the port tariffs. Businesses will react to the situation and adjust accordingly. Considerations need to be made that businesses may respond with the following should the minimum wage increase. And results of our survey shows on how, as a percentage, how they will respond to each of these things. They will consider fewer entry-level positions, shifts from full-time to part-time or casual employees, reduction in hours, elimination of jobs, changes in shifts in scheduling, compression with wages, especially with longer-term employees who are already at the 9-10, 20, or 10-10 levels, changes in the pay allocation, creating inequity, risking welfare benefits with an increased income for families within the poverty threshold, hurting those on fixed incomes. And so for these reasons for raising the minimum wage, GHRA understands that every employee should be well compensated for their efforts. And majority of the employees in the industry are actually not at minimum wage. Time and time again, GHRA has raised concerns for other issues that impact the standard of living of our residents. For those earning low wages, we need to look at other initiatives that will make a real difference, such as improving the quality of our public education system, reducing the dropout rates, increasing graduates, developing skilled workers again, and supporting a workforce development program with training for soft and hard skills, developing public and private partnerships to improve on that training, better coordination of public and social services, and helping low-income families via tax cuts or increases to the earned income tax credit, which boosts the family's resources. Raising the standard of living is a complex and long-term solution which requires the government to provide the structure, program, and services to develop its people and grow the economy for longer and lasting changes. It is unrealistic to think that increasing the standard of living will come from increasing the minimum wage. A minimum wage, again, is meant to be an entry-level wage position that enables workers to gain the necessary skills to become a contributing citizen. With good performance and productivity, workers will have opportunities to command higher wages. Increasing the minimum wage will essentially change the market conditions for a company and cause changes in its structure, which will ultimately affect hardworking people in the workforce. The minimum wage, again, is not meant to be a living wage. According to the American Hotel Lodging Association and Asian American hotel owners, a report stated that those in the industry who would be most negatively affected by extreme minimum wage increases would be small business entrepreneurs. The legislature and government in Guam have to understand the scale effect that increased cost equals increased prices. The accounts for a multiplier effect on goods and services, which result in consumers purchasing fewer goods because of the increased prices and employers hiring fewer workers. In addition, there is the substitution effect, which is the decrease in the use of low-wage workers and more technology to replace workers over time for increased productivity. These are some of the things just to consider while we look at increasing, again, not just minimum wage, but also GRT, the increases at the port, and with the health insurance premium tax being considered. Employee wages should be based on market conditions and productivity. Increasing these minimum wages will have adverse economic outcomes that will affect the productivity and service levels because of its ripple effect. Increasing an employee's pay may also mean increasing, again, cost of goods or services, increasing both the employer and employees' income taxes, raising market prices, hurting job growth, and lowering profits and fewer reinvestments into capital expenditures. For the employer, as discussed, they would have to adjust staffing and productivity, change compensation programs, look at additional taxes, which makes up 1/3 of total costs, change fringe benefits, reduce or remove job opportunities for 14 to 17 if we do not consider a youth wage, change job perks, and have a more selective hiring process. In closing, we need to really be reminded that Guam is a tourist destination that competes with Southeast Asia, where the cost of labor, goods, and services are a lot less expensive even with today's rates. GVB and tourism stakeholders have done an excellent job over the years in diversifying the market, promoting Guam, increasing arrivals, and delivering on service to ensure a sustainable future for tourism. Raising prices will definitely have a rippling effect on consumer goods and services. Businesses will adjust accordingly to the cost of doing business and transfer the cost to the consumer in the way of increasing prices. Right-sizing operations will be considered as well in adjusting productivity and cost. They will definitely find efficiencies that ultimately affect all of us, both the consumers and its employees. Businesses have to find these efficiencies. Businesses will have to perform in difficult market conditions, considering the cost of doing business on Guam, where there is a barrage of increasing government and regulatory requirements, taxes, and fees, and considering also the rise in utility costs. Again, GHRA would like to thank the Speaker for his invitation to work on Bill 20-34. We are grateful for the opportunity to help draft the language and make subsequent changes after today for the minimum wage and including tip credit. As a reminder to all of you, GHRA is always available to serve as a resource to the Guam Legislature to bridge the industry with the community and keep its members engaged. Sidus Masi.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rose. Dr. Mabini.
Yes. Thank you. Good afternoon, Speaker Cruz, Committee on Appropriations and Adjudication, fellow senators. I'd like to thank you again for inviting me to provide a written testimony. As requested, by the way, I did provide a copy of the letter that I had written. If you would like to, you could follow along with me. As requested, dear Chairman Cruz, as requested, I'm submitting this written testimony, providing some perspective based on my professional experience and in serving in the Guam Department of Labor, relative to the proposed Bill number 2034, an act to repeal and reenact Section 3105 of Article 1, Chapter 3, Title 22, GCA, relative to responsibly raising the minimum wage. As we know, a minimum wage study was conducted to help assess the impact of the previous increase to $8.25 an hour. It was conducted by Market Research Development, or MRD, and made available early this year in February. Based on our review, the findings concluded that given the positive economic conditions in that period, there was minimal impact. As such, it is recommended that public leaders support efforts for economic growth programs or legislative incentives to nurture businesses. This would help offset any possible impact from a minimum wage increase. As such, there are small businesses that express their skepticism in their ability to withstand such changes. Generally, and confirmed by other private sector study feedback, businesses may be forced to increase prices or reduce hours and full-time employees. In light of this, we recognize that individuals were concerned for their ability to maintain job security and benefits. Important to note is that these same concerns are also shared by the employers from the study. Consideration should also be made to continue supporting more training opportunities, which GDOL promotes, especially for innovative programs that train and place willing citizens for qualified and skilled jobs. To reiterate, as benefits are highly sought by workers, there should be focus on the development of innovative benefit programs to help citizens tackle health and cost of living issues. The Guam Department of Labor looks forward to continuing its efforts to improve in its regulatory role, as well as employment services and training opportunities for those most in need. Regards.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to testify? All right. Dr. Mabini, I would like to impose again on the Department of Labor. Ms. Rhodes and Mr. Shringi have both indicated a desire to amend this legislation and include tip credit. I know that your department is experienced in tip credit from a couple of decades ago. I would like to ask if you could assist in the writing of the statute as it relates to tip credit. Some of the ideas that Ms. Rhodes presented, I was like, how am I going to write all that into? So if you can all work together, I want to thank the Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association and the Chamber of Commerce. I did challenge you to come up with a tip credit, and I appreciate the fact that you're coming forward with it. And I want to also state my appreciation for the fact that the only thing that I said that I wouldn't do would be consider it if it was minimal. Or I won't use the language I used in the office the other day. And so, but if you can help, and your staff in writing the legislation so they can implement it. I don't want to write something that they can't understand and won't be able to implement and oversee. So if we can write it, or at least work together and then present it to us, I would really appreciate that.
Yes, Speaker, we'll go ahead and I'll be working together with Mary and maybe even Bobby. Absolutely. Yes.
The language that we submitted actually is similar to the federal language with DOL and the Fair Labor Standards Act on tip credit. And so we also created a frequently asked questions document, which we provided your office. So I'll already offer that to Dr. Sam Mabini.
Okay, great. Thank you. And those are two other interesting ideas, the minor wage, and I appreciate the fact that, that's hard for me to say, no, at least it recognizes the federal minimum wage as the basis. And so we will consider that. We'll hear testimony this afternoon. Under our current standing rules, because if we were to make some of these amendments, it would have to have another hearing. Sure. We will work on amending Bill 20, recirculating it and announcing another hearing, and see how people react to it at that point. Because at this point, we were the only ones that were discussing tip credit and youth wages, but I've received some testimony that from some young people that would have objected to it. But let's have that at a later hearing. But I appreciate the fact that we've been able to work on something that is palatable. And I guess, as somebody put it, you have a good compromise when both of us are going to want to choke on it. Neither one of us is happy with it, but at least it's moving forward. So I appreciate the fact that we have made this effort. And I want to publicly acknowledge that I appreciate the fact that the Chamber and GHRA, you've almost lived in my office the last several months. And so I appreciate the fact that we've been working towards this day. And let's see how this works with our new rules and what happens afterwards. Otherwise, my vice chair and then the vice speaker and then the assistant minority lead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I just want to thank the Chamber as well as the Guam Hotel Restaurant Association for coming forward and offering alternatives or different language should this legislation proceed through the legislative process, because I think that that's certainly a good start in terms of making sure that there's that open dialogue and communication between the private sector as well as members of this legislative body. So I appreciate the perspective that you brought to the table in alterations and amendments. The one question I have, and this is certainly an issue, we know that there's a large percentage of our people right now who are, they do not have medical insurance other than what is provided by the government. And then when they work in the private sector, certainly there are some employers that are able to provide that support, but then there are others that are just not able to cover. My question is based on the proposed adjustment, because I noticed that your proposed adjustment is more conservative versus what the Speaker's proposal puts forward. Based on your proposed numbers, do you anticipate, and knowing the businesses within your sector, do you anticipate that impacting the coverage and the co-payments that employers presently provide for their employees? Because we want to make sure, at least from my perspective, I want to make sure that our people continue to have medical coverage, because that's where it supports individuals, the employers, and their family members. So do you, by any chance, have any perspective that you can share in terms of what an impact would? Please, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator, again, thank you for the question. Going back to the inquiry, I mean, do we feel that, you know, any increment will impact the level of entities, private entities, providing medical insurance for their employees? I mean, I can't give you a definite answer, but I can sort of cite some results from our study that was conducted, where I believe, yeah, I mean, no doubt about it, whenever you have any type of an increment, you know, be it raising the minimum wage, be it increasing GRT, creating this 4% health fee, there's obviously going to be an impact towards businesses and their operational expenses. In regards to a question that was posed to our joint membership here, was, will the proposed minimum wage increase cause your company to make any of the following changes to accommodate the proposed increase? Yeah, unfortunately, there was a number that said that almost 30% here said that it would actually sort of force them to reduce health benefit insurances. But of course, you know, to a certain degree. Obviously, if we're looking at a 10-10 level, then maybe that number would definitely increase even more. So, will any impact result in some impact, adverse impact for entities seeking medical insurance? Obviously, benefits would be impacted. But it's hard to really gauge at this point how much of that impact would it be, but there probably could be. I mean, and I think that goes back to a discussion that's already ongoing with Senator Rodriguez and his committee on how do we work on that problem. I know he has legislation that he's proposed, and we have our position on that as well. And I think we'd like to continue that conversation. But going back to your question, obviously any type of an impact would create an adverse impact.
And that's one of the reasons why I qualify my statement that based on the conservative figures that the two entities, the Guam Hotel Restaurant Association has proffered, as well as the Guam Chamber of Commerce, based on that conservative figure, what do you anticipate to be the impact on medical and health insurance? But I understand it's a very general question. It's difficult to gauge at this point in time, but those are issues that we as a community, especially on this end, we pass legislation, and then we need to make sure that we walk it through and understand how businesses will be able to continue to provide medical coverage or health insurance coverage if they're presently providing it today, and then subsequent to any increase in the minimum wage. So that's certainly an important part in any consideration. Yes, Ms.
Just to add, so if you look at the actual PowerPoint presentation, 78% of the respondents were actually in the service industry in tourism. So we had conducted a different survey last year for a different bill that we were having to deal with. And we did survey our members, and 100% of them were offering insurance at the time. And participation level was between 70 to 90%. So it's not 100% because some of them have insurance with their spouses' employers too, right? So there are other reasons why they may not be participating 100% at one given employer. So that skews it a little bit because they may have insurance elsewhere, whether their spouse works for the federal or local government or another private sector employer. But considering the fact when we did do the survey, 100% of them offer insurance, I think it's important to note that the direct question here is, will the proposed minimum wage of Bill 20-34 affect your businesses? 29.6% said they will definitely reduce health insurance benefits, and then 25% said they will eliminate. So I think it's important to note, especially again, given the landscape that we're considering other increases and other taxes and fees, that should these things all go through the legislature, undoubtedly you will definitely see change. But you're already starting to see some concern just on the minimum wage proposal. But again, this is based on the 920 and the 1010.
Sure. But to add to that, I mean, the survey that the Chamber put out recently, in fact, that was, I believe, the press release that went out on Friday. I was just reading some of the comments here. Normally, the bigger concern now becomes you have a minimum wage proposal. You have a proposal to increase the GRT by 19%. You have a proposal to increase to create a health insurance premium fee. You also have, of course, the port tariff and the test law and all these other things. So when you sort of combine everything together, one of the most consistent comments that we're noticing when it comes to benefits from private businesses is that the first item that's right there on top of it is reviewing medical insurance. So really going back to your question, the minimum wage does make a big impact, but collectively so does everything else. So that's why one of the things that we're concerned about, and our message is very consistent not only on this particular bill, but also with Bill 141 and 142 that just came out on the GRT increase. We also had a similar comment in Bill, Senator Morrison's Bill 122 with the liquid fuel tax, that when you start collectively looking at holistically, that would definitely create an impact on medical insurance as the easiest benefit. Because it's, when it comes to benefits, it's not necessarily, will an entity offer some sort of coverage. What may occur is premiums would obviously increase, or what may also occur is the level of benefits that they offer within would decrease. So you may go from a decent plan to just a basic plan. Yeah,
I understand there's a number of employees out there that try to bend over backwards to try to ensure that they maximize the benefits that they provide their employees, whether it's medical insurance or any additional benefits, leave, paid leave or whatnot. So I understand that particular scenario, and that's why I was asking specifically my question with the conservative numbers up to 920, how many of our businesses would react. Because based on the proposal that both entities are putting forward, you're looking at an incremental adjustment. January 2018, January 2019. And I anticipate that would allow businesses to be able to transition over time and make appropriate adjustments and hopefully keep the benefits, the level of benefits that they're presently providing their employees, if not increase it slightly. So that's one of the reasons. And I think there's one, I'll just close with this particular comment. I think that the Hotel Restaurant Association, Ms. Rhodes, you highlighted it, and you also mentioned it with one particular legislation, but I really think that we also need to, on our end, try to figure out a way to support our small business community. Regardless as to what the legislation is, in addition to looking at Bill number 20 and moving forward with it in whatever format comes in, inclusive of the tip credit, we need to start partnering with the small businesses so that whether it's a product seal program or encouraging creating incentives so that at least we can still heavily rely on our small businesses in providing key employment in our community. So I appreciate the perspectives and the recommendations that both of you have provided. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. My speaker, your questions?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you all for your testimony today and for all of you present. Appreciate you being here. I wanted to just check, Dr. Mabini, when you did this study, did it address any of these questions? The TIP statutes or any of these proposals that are being recommended by the GHRA or the Chamber?
To answer your question, not specifically in the TIP. The focus was on the impact of the increase to 825. There was mention, and which was significant for me when reading the research, was the concern of both employers and employees and their ability to be able to maintain benefits. So our study also pretty much corresponds to the percentage that they had. We found that about 37%, there was a decrease of about potentially 37% in benefits during that time for the study. So it kind of mirrors what they're projecting if the impact were to be.
So the study made a finding that there was no real impact from the increase to 825, but no, an increase beyond that?
There was impact. It wasn't so significant only because at that period of time there was economic upswing or growth, so the impact wasn't as significant. It doesn't reflect. But there was impact, obviously. I mean, we had some numbers where we saw that there was increase in prices of services or the transferring of costs. And again, the decrease in benefits, again, passing increase to clients. But collectively, the impact wasn't significant only because at that point in time, we did have a good economy reflected.
But did you also have a finding then about the future increases would have the impacts that you testified about?
That wasn't part of the scope of the study.
All right. That's from the comments that you received? Okay. All right. And I was, similarly, when you did your survey, did the survey, at least the part that we're looking at, did not include any questions related to the recommendations that you are making? For example, the tip wages. Yes, sorry, Mary. And the tip wages and the, the rates for minors. I didn't see that in the study. How do you, and it sounds like, I'm not sure if there's an agreement now, but if there is, are you thinking you're going to resurvey again your members, or are you pretty confident that they will accept these recommendations?
We already have. We actually held stakeholder meetings with just the hotelier GMs, as well as all the restaurateur GMs, and then with other members. And then we've also had our board meeting where they approved the strategy. Just so you know, tip credit used to exist on Guam for a very long time. It was actually discontinued only in language. A lot of people didn't even realize it was gone. I believe the first time it was taken out of the language of the law was, or in the Guam Code annotated, was when we went to the three-tier increase. The speaker knows because he introduced that back then. But this is about 10 years ago, I believe, maybe 12 years ago, where we had the 50-cent incremental increases, even with the federal wage. So tip credit has always been in existence on Guam. And so when we went to those increases, the language went away. And then we went to the dollar increase. The recommendation when it turned into public law was to only recognize tips. It took away tips and gratuities. And so that's why we're asking that it be added back in, because it used to be allowed on Guam. And a lot of businesses, just so you know, we've been working with Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division, both Guam and federal, just the last, I'd say 2-3 years, to re-educate the businesses, to make them understand that tip credit is no longer allowed. and so they have to pay $825 plus. And so that has been something that we feel a lot of our members now understand. But imagine, GHRA is not required, it's not a government entity, so it's not required to join. It's a private non-profit member trade organization. So a lot of all of our members know now, but there are so many businesses, especially the small businesses, smaller restaurateurs who are not members of GHRA, and we hope that, you know, this is part of that educational campaign and learning process that everybody realized that we need to add it back in because businesses may be implementing that, but that's an unknown because Wage and Hour Division is really responsible for that portion to enforce it. So we're just asking to really add the language back in because it was always there prior to all these wage changes.
All right. And
but to answer your other question, we are looking to send out another survey to gauge our membership, similar to Chamber, on the GRT increase and FMLA and all of those other changes. So we'll certainly add back in the youth wage and the tip credit because we have agreed on the $725 collectively as a group. So we will, gauge the membership on that as well. To answer your question.
I also just wanted to say that I appreciate your pointing out that there are other pieces of legislation that definitely affect particularly small businesses, and so I do appreciate that. And you're right, the list continues to grow, and those are significant. We are facing rising prices, rising fees, rising costs in several areas of the government, and requiring additional benefits. So I do appreciate your comments regarding that. Do you think that following your recommendations will then allay your predicted results, where the companies have threatened to, do these things, reduce the hours, eliminate jobs, change pay allocation, all of that? Do you think that then this is a satisfactory way to proceed?
Well, actually, Madam Vice Speaker, that's a very good question. Yeah, I mean, in general, if you throw it out there, the common answer would be, that there shouldn't be any increases or any wage increases. But what we put together as far as the chamber goes, and working hand in hand with GHRA, was coming up with something that was comprehensive enough to sort of balance the playing field. I mean, technically, we understand that there's not one, but there's two bills in the legislature to possibly increase the minimum wage. So the reality is certainly there that something will pass. So we figured, let's work with the legislature and find out a more comprehensive way of coming up with something that's going to be as palatable as possible. Obviously, any increase will impact many businesses, or some businesses rather, and some of the smallest ones would be the most vulnerable. But at the same token, we have to look at how do we package this up. The tip wage definitely helps the F&B industry, or at least the server industry. Having this youth wage, which I don't think is going to be so much of a major impact, but still it would help offset some expenses. So what the chamber sort of put together was something a little bit more comprehensive. And of course, Senator Uggin's legislation on amending the Dave Santos Act, that would really help the real small, the very small entities. I mean, I'm talking about those small retailers or whatnot that may have 1, 2 minimum wage earners on their payroll. And it's sort of to offset it. So while there's no perfect solution, I think that this would be what's put on the table is a little bit more palatable and comprehensive. So I hope that answers your question.
Do you know how many of the people or the businesses that were surveyed in your survey, Mary, fall into that category that might be affected by the proposed amendment to the Dave Santos Act?
No, we haven't.
No, we did engage the small business. If we were to consider raising it from 50,000 to 500,000, that was not part of the scope.
I just want to know if you knew how many of your members surveyed fit into that category.
No, we didn't.
Yeah, I'd like to say there are more in Chamber's membership as far as those small businesses, but there's definitely a percentage in ours.
Okay. All right, thank you. I have no further question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you all for your testimony, and I appreciate the recommendations provided here. I just have one item I want to talk about regarding this recommendation regarding the 14 through 17 employees at wage to be paid at the $7.25 per hour. And I know you mentioned didn't survey the employees or the employers at this time, but do you have an estimate of how many of those will fall in that category between 14 and 17 that are currently employed?
I know within the service industry there are quite a number of employers that offer jobs, especially during the summer for 14 to 17. And when we gauge our membership on that in time for the second hearing, we should have that number. But there are a lot of employers within the hospitality side, especially retail, and even within the hotels where they do hire from that. And so that's why we're suggesting that we go to the federal wage at $7.25 an hour to continue to allow the minors from ages 14 through 17 to be at that rate, because ideally they're being employed to get basic skill sets and their first opportunity to get a job, and so to prepare them once they graduate from high school. And we feel strongly that whether it go to $9.20 within the next 2 years or even in the future, considering other increases, that always having a youth wage will protect those jobs rather than them being eliminated should we just go straight to $9.20. We strongly feel that those jobs that exist today will no longer be there should we continue to increase the minimum wage without any consideration of a youth wage.
This is really new to me, but I like to learn if this is a model used in other jurisdictions, or are we just applying this here in Guam?
Yeah, there are some states with the youth wage, yes.
In actuality, the federal youth wage allows some states to go as low as $4.50 an hour. So $7.25 was just a little bit on the higher end over there. But yeah, technically, it's available.
This term here, the reason why I brought it up, existing, is because obviously if this should go through, I mean, you would be, based on the language here, shall versus may. I mean, you'll see these existing employees, they're minors, but if this should go into play, you will see these employees going backwards with their pay.
Right. No, actually, our recommendation is on a going forward basis. So should they already be making $8.25 today or even more? For example, my daughter has been working at PIC for 4 years, so she's certainly not at that rate, but it's not on a, they wouldn't roll that back. It would be on a going forward basis. And a lot of the employers would not even consider offering that if somebody comes in with work experience. So this is just the minimum for the threshold of not to go below that. It's a starting point.
And nothing prevents an employer from offering more. Nothing will prevent. So if you had a 16-year-old working for you, it doesn't mean that you have to pay them the youth minimum wage. You can
shouldn't the language be changed to may?
Well, we haven't put the language.
Well, no, the recommendation is shall.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just thinking, makes, because for the business or the employer has that flexibility.
But remember, that's minimum. Right. It shall be the minimum. They could always offer more.
Okay.
And the same with tip credit. Just so you know, the federal level for tip credit is actually $2.13. So the speaker was referring earlier to not give him a number that's way below the number we offered today at $7.25, because if we were to go as low as $2.13 or consider anything like $4 or $5, then that's not a reasonable approach to this. So the federal tip wage is $2.13. We're suggesting it be the federal wage at $7.25 as a starting point. So shall is, just for it to be at the lowest point, and then they could always offer more.
Oh, thank you. I think that really clears up my concern. I think others may be thinking, how would this take effect, or how would it be enacted, should this all go through. But I appreciate the testimony and, seeing the progress that's been made. And thank you for the past meetings we've had. Thank you.
Yes or no? Go ahead.
I just, Dr. Mabini, are there, do you know how many of the apprenticeship programs that are offered currently? I mean, what is the participation rate among the GHRA employees, or is that something you're aware of?
I don't have the percentages in front of me, but I'm sure Mary does for her group.
I serve, well, I've been on the board for almost 12 years now, so there are over 500 apprentices on Guam, and of that, GHRA, actually the tourism industry, we're way below 50 actually. There are some businesses that have a direct apprenticeship contract with their own standards, but GHRA, we have about 27. I know there are other businesses in the industry that have their own, but certainly we're not, we don't have the numbers we'd like, and that's actually something we're trying to grow, especially since GHRA has been alongside with Trades Academy in participating in the expansion grant that Dr. Mabini and her team have just received late last year. In fact, we just had our orientation training last Thursday, and we had Guam Department of Labor there together with our members so that we can get new apprentices. And our goal right now is to grow it by 20. And we're really focusing on hotel associates, which is a general position for front and back of the house, as well as facilities maintenance would be general again, which would offer from HVAC, air conditioning, to carpentry and facilities maintenance and other things, all encompassing into one apprenticeship position. So we're definitely looking to grow it, and especially with the new president announcing his support for apprenticeship in the last month, or 6 weeks ago maybe, we hope that Guam will benefit from that and actually win more grants going forward.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to comment that I'm looking very carefully at your recommendations for how to increase the standard of living for those with in low-income families, and so yeah, I was curious about that one because I think we do have some programs that we could avail ourselves of, and all right, so I appreciate that. It's very interesting that you recommended that we utilize tax cuts or increases in the earned income tax credit. Thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to add, I could get those exact numbers to you because
appreciate that.
Yes, the apprenticeship programs are, the state apprenticeship office is located at the Department of Labor at the American Job Center. Institutions like Guam Community College and Guam Trades Academy and other training institutions provide the training for the apprentices. But what's really key is industry, correct, like what Mary is referencing. They're the ones that will be pushing the necessary apprentices or apprenticeships that they need in order to grow their workforce. So we're looking forward to seeing not only hotel, but also like the construction, allied health, and technology. So as she had mentioned, the grant that we did get is pushing for 100 new apprentices this year. But that would be in addition to the existing apprentices that are still in the pipeline.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
And just for the listening audience, if anybody watches C-SPAN and the discussion in the U.S. Congress about increasing the minimum wage, the one thing that's always brought up is why increase the minimum wage when we can give them EITC? And when we have two sides of our government trying to figure out $60 million in EITC and increasing the minimum wage, there is that. I want to again acknowledge GHRA and the Chamber when Senator Morrison asked the questions. I'm glad that you pointed out that I said that I would be willing to consider as long as we didn't do the 214 or I wouldn't do the 425. And the 725 is the federal minimum. So they did come up, and I want to thank them for that. But I also, not wanting to get into a debate, but just want to clear a misconception because when Franklin Roosevelt implemented the minimum wage, many people since then have misrepresented him by saying, and the minimum wage shall be established to give teens entry-level jobs so they can have some spending cash and get some work experience, or at least that's what's usually attributed to FDR. But the truth of the matter is, his statement is actually a lot stronger. His statement is, no business which depends for existence on paying less than the living wages to its workers has any right to continue in this country. By living wages, I mean more than a bare subsistence level. I mean wages of a decent living. That is his correct statement that has morphed over the last 80 years. And so I think it's important that we historically record what the president said when he started minimum wage. But this is a good discussion moving forward, and I want to thank everybody that's been involved. I'm sure we'll see each other in a few weeks. And with that, we'll recess until 6 this evening, when the Committee on Appropriation will continue to receive testimony on Bill 20-34. Thank you.